Dear comrades, I have to congratulate all of you for our common celebration of the Victory Day. As you understand, the Victory Day, 80 years after the May of 45, becomes the most important anniversary for all the anti-imperialist and communist forces. And that's because all over the world, people are rethinking what happened those days, 80 years ago, and what is happening nowadays. My mention is not about a mechanical, primitive, historical analogy, because analogy method in history is not the most optimal. In opposite is a way of taking into account some surface aspects of similarities and differences. The main point is to think dialectically and deeply the specification of the era 80 years ago and nowadays. Of course, imperialism is imperialism, but imperialism of the beginning and the middle of 20th century is one issue, and imperialism of nowadays is another issue. Not because the imperialism became more human, but because imperialism shows the most reactionary and destroying nature, anti-humanity nature. And anti-humanity, brutal power, which is able for more tragic genocides than during the 20th century. I'm talking about that because some of our comrades think that imperialism is imperialism, that we lost the real socialism that we called early socialism in our research school. And so everybody around us are imperialists, or they have imperialist political causes. In that case, this war is none of your business, none of our business. According to that anti-dialectical interpretation, we don't have to choose between the parts of that conflict, because both of them are very bad, and it's difficult to find out which is the worst one. And on the other hand, there are some comrades, including some comrades from the former Soviet Union, who again are under the impression of historical analogies. If the first variation is under the impression of analogies about the First World War, the second variation is under the analogy of the Second World War, as if nothing is changed from 1931, 39, and 41 until nowadays, and the main enemy remains to be a variation of fascism, which is very similar and the same one as the fashion of the beginning or the middle of 20th century. This is not true. If fascism is a product, a necessity product, a necessity instrument of imperialism according to the changes, historical, dialectical changes of imperialism. We have another form, another level, and other functions of fascism. Nowadays, the imperialism is taking the form of oligarchy all over the world, and they have the pretension of building a united planetary global governance, a global superstructure. And according to the ambitions of that global superstructure, the overstate state, they are making their own fashion of nowadays. So the instrumentalization of fascism of nowadays is different than the instrumentalization of fascism of the middle of 20th century. I don't want to spend your time. I'll try to explain some things in the next session, but allow me to mention some illusions which are together with those unfruitful analogies I mentioned. For example, many people think that we have nowadays a very strong conflict between so-called anti-globalist, ideological, political, etc. thinking and approach on one hand, on the other hand, the globalist. We have the powers of the new liberal globalization on the one hand, and on the other hand we have the anti-globalization forces, which are focused on so-called traditional values. Okay? According to that pseudo-explanation, Donald Trump is a radical friend of us. Can you imagine that the leadership of nowadays first imperialist power is our fellow, or maybe a comrade? And can you imagine, for example, that the slogan to make America great again is achievable under monopolistic capital, under imperialism, in other way, without colonization and new colonization, without super exploitation and taking super value in the form of super benefits of monopolistic capital. I'm talking about that kind of illusions because we have very hard manipulation all over the world, including some communist or former communist parties. And of course, the issue of values, morality, aesthetics, etc., is a very important issue in a scientific approach of philosophy, Marxist-Leninist philosophy. But this is not an issue of choosing bad or good values. It's a deeper question. The question is which society we are for, which future we are for. And of course, the position of so-called traditional values is a position which is very similar to the most dark variations of fascism, including fascism of 20th century. It's a way of idealizing the past. But we know that idealizing the past is the only way of the losers of historical progress. the revolutionaries have to focus on the necessity of the law governed process to the communism, to the unification of human beings, of society. So let's focus on that and let's fight against some illusions. We cannot even instrumentally use the force, the brutal force of so-called anti-globalist type of trap against globalists. Thank you.